Hey everyone, and welcome to your favorite YouTube series. I mean, it's our favorite YouTube series as well, not another demo. I have with me Anthony the Hammer Coggins, as he is known, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Matt, this podcast is rapidly changing the entire podcasting game. This podcast, you're building an amazing brand very rapidly. And rapidly, you're becoming a big deal, to which I say, well, what a coincidence as we take this podcast to yet another new height as we introduce Jeffrey Gardner, the CTO of Americas, otherwise known as Gardner, from Rapid7. So with that, Gardner, I will pass this over to you. I'm going to change up how we do our first question just a little bit, in that I'm going to, instead of saying specifically, why would someone talk to Rapid7? Because everyone has heard me talk about Rapid7. But let's start with introduce yourself to the audience. And then from a CTO perspective, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing happening in the industry right now.
Yeah, so I'll start with two things. First, Anthony, you stole my nickname. I didn't actually know your nickname was the Hammer.
It's not.
My nickname. Oh, all right. I was well. It starts off with lies. Just the
Usually
throne of
asks the hard
lies.
question, so I nicknamed him the Hammer. Yeah.
Well, that's fine. So lie number one, debunked. Number two, Matt, how you stay so humble about yourself as you're growing to fame? It just moves me deeply internally. I mean,
deep breathing and yoga mostly is how that works.
Mindfulness exercises all day. Yes. But nice to be here with you guys. As Matt mentioned, I'm the CTO of the Americas for Rapid7. I've been at Rapid7 for 4-ish years. In the industry, over 20. I stopped counting because it just makes me sad when I go back and remember things 20 years, like movies that have been released, and I'm like, I saw that in the theater. Oh God, theaters. But yes, so 20 years in the industry, helped build out the cyber range for the Marine Corps, worked with the FBI's cybersecurity task force. When I got out to help with their ICS, defining critical infrastructure, big in offensive security, big in incident response. Love this. It's almost as fun as playing the OG Xbox that Matt has in his background right there, but you know, it's going to be a tie. But as to the question, like what am I seeing in the industry? I'm seeing a number of things. So the first is, everybody kind of went cloud and then rushed towards cloud, and then they're like, God, cloud's expensive. So they're kind of like, this is pendulum swinging back and forth. So now, like, hybrid environments, everybody's kind of going like, yeah, we're probably going to be hybrid for the foreseeable future, just because of costs and scale and everything. And then the other trend is from consolidation, like we want to consolidate everything onto a single platform. Now, due to some recent issues that have occurred in the industry that have been in the news over the last few weeks, people are going, I don't know if I want to consolidate everything to one vendor anymore, because if that one vendor crashes my stuff, we're hosed. And then the other is kind of like the realization of, like, the AI ML promise. Like, it is not like the golden fleece from, the Argonauts. Like, it is not the panacea of the universe. And people are slowly starting to realize that the industry as a whole has really oversold its capabilities. I mean, not every company has, but, like, AI is going to solve all your problems. Everything's going to be AI. Nay, nay. No, it shan't. So those are kind of some of the major things, and we could take this any which way you want to go, but those are, from Black Hat and last week and some of the others, just chatting with people, those are the major themes that I've seen.
Yeah, well, let's dive into the platform one, since you brought that up as one of the things, because I certainly believe that is a pendulum that swings kind of back and forth. We go from best of breed to platform, back to best of breed, back to platform. Some of that depends on what some of the vendors are doing. So but I guess as working for an organization that does have a pretty extensive platform of products that you've put together, like, how do you, when folks are saying, hey, we're looking best of breed and you've got a platform, like, how are those conversations dealt with, and talks that you have with customers?
Well, there's platform, and then there's platform. So there's platform in the sense of we have a suite of offerings, but it's really like our suite. Like no touchy, no touch from the Emperor's New Groove. Like this is ours. Nobody shall play with it. It's my preciouses. Going to Lord of the Rings. Let's just mix it up a little bit, have some fun. But then there's like platform where we provide the underlying, technological base, and you can add on the things that you want, but it will all interact in a unified fashion. That's kind of like the difference between, older Rapid7 and Rapid7 now after the release of our most recent acquisition, Noetic, which is Surface Command and Exposure Command. I promise this is going to be like a vendor promo. I hate those kind of podcasts and webinars, but like it is a transition with the company to go, okay, we want to be more open and agnostic because, previously it was like you had Rapid7's products and you couldn't bring in any data from anything else. That's a platform like a cul-de-sac. It's like you have a bunch of houses on the same street, but they're not connected in any way. Now it's like in an apartment building. Like we all talk to each other, we all pass in the halls, we all share the same electrical water, all that stuff. It just makes it a little better. So when you're talking like best of breed, like, hey, bring in your best of breed next gen AV, bring in your best of breed proxy, whatever it is. You could plug it into the platform and it'll work. That's kind of like, so it doesn't matter if you want to go here or here, as long as the underlying tech enables everything to work together better, then that's a platform. If
Like
it's,
aggregation versus
yeah,
yeah.
because like people have enough, the thing I've heard from practitioners is we have enough data. We have enough, like, we have too much data. We don't need more data. We need to make sense of the data that we have, eliminate that abstraction layer between product and brain and just give us the information that we need so we can make decisions faster. And it's like, all right, great. Heard you. Let's do the thing. Because I mean, in most products, like, all right, like in a sim, for example, like I have to go from brain. I want to find all systems that have port 22 open. That has to go through that abstraction layer of, okay, now I got to make that into a query and then input that into my underlying technology. Like there's a breakdown. Whereas if I could just go, tell me all systems that have port 22 open and input that into the product, bam, there you go. So that's what we're working towards. That's what the industry is working towards. Just making it more natural because it's so unnatural interfacing with security tools. Like there's so much additional thought and brain work, and it just takes us out of the train of thought that it's not helping anybody.
Yeah, a couple of things that I have to unpack there. One, Emperor's New Groove, maybe the most underrated animated movie of all time, and also one of my favorite quotes. So 5 bonus points for you for actually bringing that into the podcast. And yes, fantastic. And then from the other thing, I would say honestly, if I ever had a criticism of the Rapid7 platform, was that it felt a little closed off. So I think the fact that you guys are listening to the market and listening to the customers and changing some of that is good. We see companies out there that don't, right? They're like, no, this is how this is, and this is how it's going to be. So I think companies that are willing to move and change and evolve as the marketplace does is definitely important. And so kudos to you guys for doing that. You mentioned also the all of our favorite acronym AI and ML and LMNOP. But as we've seen kind of, this huge splash and everybody lost their minds and everybody's marketing department put that everywhere to now where we've settled in a little bit. I think, we've seen some organizations utilize some machine learning, which I still think we're in more of a machine learning than an artificial intelligence world, but have started using some of that better. Some of them are using it terribly. I think the social media apps are using it really terribly and making them even more annoying than they were before. But I guess from a company perspective, what is Rapid7 and what are you seeing from a machine learning standpoint, and how are you guys implementing using some of that new technology in your tools?
Yeah, so we've been very deliberate and incremental. Some would say slow walking it, but the reality is the technology it does have a propensity for good, but kind of like training a puppy. You know, like you have to nurture it, you have to grow it, because I mean, what the hidden secret behind a lot of the, you know, the curtain is, there are armies of people training these it's not like you just turn on a model, insert some data, and it goes, we have these amazing insights. It takes a lot of time and deliberate action to not introduce bias in your data sets, to not introduce bias in your training. Like, it takes a while. And it also, it's like, what's the goal of that implementation of AI slash machine learning? Like, is it to replace or is it to enable? Because if you're using it to enable, that's where I see I mean, just personally, like Rapid7 hat off, that's where the most value is going to come from for any of these, you know, technologies. Is how is it going to enable, you know, your analysts, your engineers, your C-suite to take better action? So for example, we've had it in the product for a while. We haven't been very loud about it. So like the uh, user analytics in the sim, for example, that's been running on machine learning algorithms for years. We just don't come out and like make a big noise about it. The NTA appliance, the threat appliance that we have, it's had, you know, ML based data exfiltration capabilities for a while. We just haven't made huge press releases. The MDR service on the back end, they've been utilizing machine learning for more than a hot minute to not only you know, help better identify true and false positives. So we have, you know, something in the background which will analyze an investigation compared to similar investigations and give our analysts a clue, which is like, hey, this is 89% similar to another investigation we've seen. It was a true positive. Like, it surfaces things up. We also have an engine on the back end, kind of like I was talking about earlier, where they can just go show me all machines that have port 22 open, and it'll create the query that they can then put into the sim, or they can ask it, what's this IP? Where have you seen it before? What's its reputation? So there's a lot of stuff on the background that we've been working with, essentially patient zero, our SOC, to really fine tune before we get that out there into the universe. Because again, we're selling this to teams who are using it for incident response, for using it for those things. Our SOC is, I mean, again, kind of biased, but our SOC is one of the best in the industry. So if, when they're happy with it, then we're going to release to the outside world. Until they're like ecstatic about it, it's not going to go out there, because again, it might be okay, but I don't want okay. I want, like, this is going to really help somebody.
Yeah, and you know, you made the point about, instead of replacing, enabling, and you know, increasing your productivity, or your just, you know, having access to more information quicker and all that. And you know who's using it to, you know, increase their productivity today is threat actors, right? I mean,
Yep.
the number of poorly worded phishing emails I've seen has gone down to almost zero.
Yeah.
Right. Like, the number of voice cloning attacks, of deep fakes, you know, that I've personally seen have also gone up quite a bit. And then you've got, you know, stories like, what was it? Earlier this year or late last year, that the story of the deep fake that hit that Hong Kong executive. You know, it was their CFO on a Zoom call. Like, they swear it was him. Ended up, you know, wiring millions of dollars, God knows where. And just the propensity for that to continue to increase. So, what I want to ask you is, where do you see those detections or protections for AI-based attacks coming? Because it seems like we as defenders are maybe behind the eight ball today.
Well, so it depends on the area that you're speaking about, I think. So when you're talking about like AI deepfakes for video or for email, that's somewhat different from, you know, like AI-based attacks that are going to hit the network or the endpoint. Because like the network and endpoint based stuff, while I'm seeing, you know, novel malware being created in terms of code base, what it's actually doing, like the TTPs, they're not really changing. Like, it's still doing the same. At the end of the day, if you boil it down, it's still performing data exfiltration, lateral movement, privilege escalation, you know, you name it. And it's not doing it in novel ways. It's just the upfront is novel, but like how you intro, it's like, this is Anthony, it's brand new. And then Anthony comes up and you still do the same old song and dance at the end, at the routine. Like that's what we're getting. Because a lot of, next gen AV EDRs, how they work is, pre-execution. Like kind of post-execution is kind of gone by the wayside. They're all like looking at what that thing's going to do right up front. So that's where you're seeing that front loading of malware trying to trick, the EDRs and be like, no, I'm safe. Look, it's Anthony, like chess hands, and then to let it pass. But in the reality, like we've formed most of our detections. I know Rapid7 calls it attacker behavior analytics, but it's essentially the top end of the pyramid of pain. Like that's yeah. So that's where we go. So no matter what they do, if they ghostwrite, they try and introduce NOPs, like whatever they want to do, at the end it's still trying to lateral move. And we can detect that because we're not necessarily pre-execution, we're sitting in a different layer. With regards to like the deep fakes with AI based video, that's kind of like a battle of the AIs because the way that they're combating it is there's AI video, but now there's AI checking the AI video to see if there's any telltale signs of AI generation in it. So it's like the battle of the Skynets there. With email, I think there's already some good solutions out there on the market. But it's almost in a way doing what the bad guys are doing. So a lot of those AI ML based email solutions, they'll go back and look at like a user's history for I think a year, and they'll figure out like how do they chat, what verbiage do they use, where do they use commas, etc. Well, that's exactly what the bad guys are doing. So then they go basically back down to like infosec basics of okay, what's the device? Where is it coming from? Like, so it's this swing of technology. It's like, all right, so now we can't rely on the text. Now we got to go back to like envelope sender, like dress IP. So it's always amusing. It's like fashion. What comes in, goes out, it comes back in again, kind of like the
Yeah.
platform thing. Like
Yeah, everything's
in the
cyclical.
90s, it
Yeah.
was hell no, we're not putting everything on the same platform. Like I want a different vendor in every part of my stack. And then it was like, nope, everything's got to be the same vendor. And it keeps doing this and this. It's very I think the industry is very reactive. Like it just kind of goes the way the wind blows instead of like, how are we actually going to solve the underlying problem instead of like just seesawing back and forth along with the ARR swing. Like, where's the ARR? We can go and chase that tomorrow. Like, let's actually solve the problem instead of like just treating the symptoms. Almost like doctors. There's no money in the cure. Um, but I mean, at least I could say at Rapid7, like, and especially with the release of this, exposure and surface command, like we are trying to solve problems because we're not introducing things, like we're giving you the ability to fix it along with introducing the problem. So like when you look at a solution, I think whatever the solution may be, like, does it just give you a problem or does it give you a way to fix the problem now, but then also address the underlying structural issue that caused the problem? Because there's those layers. Like I can quarantine an endpoint. That's great. That solves the problem immediately. But how did that thing get on the endpoint in the first place? Is it some Microsoft control that wasn't implemented correctly? Like, did it get past our email? Did it get past our gateway? Like, let's actually get to the root cause. If it's a person, that's a whole other different problem that can't be solved by technology. But at least we can identify where these things have fallen short.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier, which I agree with, like people kind of went haphazardly to the cloud and now they've pulled some stuff back and have gone into this more of a hybrid mode. But we've still seen, I think, a propensity for people to, whether that's through SaaS apps or other things, of still kind of moving infrastructure and a lot of their workloads to the cloud. Do you think that the new threats from these AI scenarios with some of the attackers is going to change that? Do people feel more comfortable if it's, I guess I'll throw this out there to both of you since, since Anthony, you guys, have these systems. Like, do you feel more comfortable if things are back on-prem versus being out in the cloud, knowing that all of this other stuff is going on? Or do you feel like maybe it's not going to have an effect on that?
I think
So, I mean,
on-prem's harder to monitor. It's like with cloud, you've got APIs and plugins for everything. And if I want to monitor, my Azure, my AWS, I could go to Wiz, I could go to Orca, I could go to Rapid7, like for all that monitoring. If I want to monitor like Active Directory, like just plain Jane on-prem AD, like it sucks, right? And securing AD today still sucks. And securing VMware today still sucks. So while I think the pendulum swinging back and forth, is a lot of reasons for financial um, concerns. At the end of the day, I still personally believe that it's easier to secure the cloud than it is on-prem.
Okay. Interesting.
So I mean, I'll agree with it's easier to secure the cloud than it is on-prem. Because in the cloud, the control center is essentially open to you. Like you have every knob, every dial you could possibly think of. They give the security aspect to you. They're like, here, you secure this anyway, which is the boon in that you can make it more secure, but then it's like the wheel and the woe. Like the wheel is you can make it more secure. The woe is it's on you to make it more secure. Like there are so many buttons and knobs to turn where like I don't want to say on-prem is the easy mode, but there's a lot less you have to worry about because vendors don't give you that level of control as they do in the cloud. With regards to like where things go in the cloud, like I don't think AI is going to be coming to a data center near you. I mean, just the power requirements, the hardware requirements, I think that's going to be in the cloud for the
Right.
foreseeable
Nobody's
future.
hosting their own AI on,
Yeah.
an ESXi host somewhere in a data center. Yeah.
Yeah. But like how that is secured, I mean, I think NIST, came out with how, some guidelines and SP around how you should secure AI. It's all about how you interact with that large language model. Like don't interact with it directly, interact with it through an API. Like if you follow the guidelines, it can be very secure. I think in terms of placement, like I think that's where a lot of people have finally started to figure out, like, okay, like our front ends, great, like we can host that in the cloud. That those can be scaled, but like a lot of the compute and network intensive resources, I think those are gonna either stay on-prem or be moved back to on-prem because I mean, like Azure to get data out of Azure, there's a cost. It might not be a whole lot, but there's definitely a cost. Compute in AWS, there's a cost. There's all these costs, and if it's in one of those environments where like anybody can hit it at any given time, and it's not just an internal resource, as much as they want to say costs can be predictable, it's not predictable. It can't be predictable, and they're not going to flat rate any of it because then they're going to lose money. So it's like it's really on to the companies to be like, okay, what is the least amount of compute and network? Like that's usually a front end. Like that's not a lot of compute. It can be serverless, like just code, great. But your database is probably going to be on-prem because that's going to be a lot of crunching, or your analysis that's going to be on-prem. So there's going to be that mix. I mean, maybe cloud gets cheaper in the future, but like that's what I'm hearing from my colleagues is like how do I put together a budget when it could be 3 million or 30 million? And it's all just based on how much traffic this thing gets. Like that's not feasible for me to do.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride over the next couple of years. I got a feeling. So you mentioned earlier a recent acquisition that Rapid7 made. So I guess tell us a little bit about that and any other new stuff or things that are happening over at Rapid7. Like where are you guys heading? What are you doing?
Yeah, the acquisition again, like I kind of mentioned, it marks, in one man's humble opinion, kind of a watershed moment for Rapid7. In two ways. So, VM is becoming attack surface management. Like it's just you've kind of seen it slowly march that way over the years. Like you've had VM products, you've had cloud products, and then you're like, I got to go get this other solution to kind of bring everything together. And then even when I have those, like, what if I run an Nmaps? Like, what about all my various systems? Like, how do I tie everything together? Because if like I think ASM in my head comes before VM because if you don't have a view of your attack surface, how the hell are you going to know what to scan for vulnerabilities if you don't know? It's like CIS controls 1 and 2, hardware inventory, software inventory. That's attack surface management. Well, and you have to throw in identity too. Like if you throw that in there, like that's truly understanding where your vulnerabilities are, what you need to look at, and then you can prioritize everything down the line. Vulnerability management, DNR. But unless you have a rock solid ASM program, it's going to be hard to make those actually work. And by rock solid, so I use 2 different phrases. So the first is from the military, which is 2 is 1, 1 is none. Like you got to have your battle buddy. And if you apply that to data, unless you have 2 different sources validating that piece of data, how sure can you be about that piece of information? It's still anecdotal. Whereas the intelligence community's view is, unless you're validating any piece of information with 3 separate sources, you essentially have to consider that piece of information a lie or to be coming from an unreliable narrator. So with these ASM systems, like unless it's checking that against your data sources and being like, okay, let's just say CrowdStrike says the host name is A. Active Directory says the host name is A. We're also getting that from, the web proxy that's saying it's A. Cool. Now we've got a bunch of different things saying this is A. Now that A becomes fact. It doesn't become, anecdotal evidence. So once you have fact, then you can start addressing the visibility. And then once you have visibility, you can manage. And then once you can manage, you can exercise control. So it's ultimately about controlling that attack surface. And that's why we brought on, that's why the acquisition quite honestly took a while. We'd actually been looking, it seemed like it was fast. I was looking at this for like 2 years ago, like looking at competitors in the space. And it took a while because we wanted to be very deliberate in making sure that whatever we acquired actually addressed the problem that was present in the ASM space, which was most of the products out there just collect that data and they don't give you any control over what that source of truth is. With Noetic's data model, it allows you to say, all right, if I have DNS in Active Directory, I have DNS coming from Infoblox, I have DNS coming from whatever. What do I believe? Which one do I think is the source of truth? Infoblox. I want Infoblox to be the source of truth for DNS. Bam, select it. Host names, wherever the hell you want it to be. And we correlate all of it together to give you a picture of everything that's in your environment from those disparate sources. The other cool thing is it allows you to do kind of vendor agnostic custom risk scoring. So for example, we can say, if this system doesn't have EDR on it, 200 points of the risk score. If it's seen if it's seen on the firewall, but it's not seen in the vulnerability management, that's another 100 because we're not scanning. Like you can cut that onion whichever way you want, which is like letting the customers choose their own adventure. Where before it's like the vendor states, here's the path. We're going to let you do some side quests along the way. This is truly like the open world RPG of ASM. Like we're going to let you go whichever way you want to go. It's going to be your story. You're ultimately in control of this. While the vendor, us, is giving you guidance on the end. So it's super, super cool. I mean, I full disclosure, I was actually on one of the competitors' websites for a number of years prior to this acquisition happening because 5 years ago, I saw like, this is the SIM, I call it the SIM for everything else. Essentially, like we use a SIM for incident response, but where are we the other 90% of our day? We're in 10, 20 different tools checking on things. Well, with this kind of a solution, the way that I've operationalized it is SIM for incident response, go for it. Everything else, you're pretty much going to be asking these things the questions because it's pulling in all that data from all those sources. You really don't need to go anywhere else. And it's validated, correlated information. So you don't need to go and check if it's true. It is true. I mean, you can if you want to, but the system does it. It validates against multiple sources. So that's one of the cool things that we're working on. Again, in the background, we are working on a number of AI initiatives. We're going to be releasing some other cool stuff to the Surface and Exposure Command platform over the coming months that I can't exactly detail, but one might be coming out in the next month or so. I don't know, maybe sooner rather than later. But yeah, and that's why I said it kind of marks a watershed moment for Rapid7. The second reason why is if you've been a Rapid7 customer for any amount of time, you'll notice that when we acquire something, took a hot minute, for it to be added and integrated to the platform, usually about a year, sometimes longer. There's no point in hiding the truth because anyone with eyes can go and see and read this. I mean, it's a fact. But with this Noetic acquisition, you saw like we announced it, I think it was like July or June or July, and then come August, it's fully integrated into the platform. Like you see a complete UI change, it's ingesting everything. That marks a change in how Rapid7 does business because again, like it's just you've never seen this happen. And a lot of that is honestly, the work of our, the dev and engineering teams. Craig Adams, our chief product officer, has come in. He's only been with us for a couple months, doing rock star work. So it's just the things are starting to click, and we've kind of found our rhythm like we had. So it's kind of like that resurgence of like the excitement of Rapid7 from 2020. Internally, we're feeling that excitement today again, which is just awesome to see.
One of the things that I've always said is I see a lot of companies out there that put a platform together, like from my position, I at GuidePoint, I see a lot of cool tech out there. A lot of vendors are always dealing with vendors. And sometimes it's like, there's cool tech, but is anybody going to buy it? It's cool tech, but is it actually filling a real need? Like there's a lot of cool tech that's just cool tech for the sake of it. There are people that are putting platforms together that sometimes you shake your head and you go, what's the purpose of adding that to that? Like I don't see the synergy there. Some of it could be because you guys have that wrapper of the MDR service around it, which I'm sure helps on a lot of things. But I will say I've always thought that Rapid7, that you guys do a good job of actually putting a cohesive platform together of stuff that people need. And again, I think it helps that you have, the tie that binds there is probably that MDR service, which I'm guessing that this will eventually be wrapped into as well. So, again, kudos to you guys for that. There.
Appreciate
I fanboyed. I don't always fanboy on this thing, but I think everyone at Rapid7 knows Anthony's right there along with me. So,
Well, I still got some beef with vulnerability management, but we can talk about that later.
Oh, the OG of Rapid7
Yes,
ness.
yes.
Actually, that's a good point, though. Let me ask you this, because we are in an era from a vulnerability management standpoint where people aren't just looking at servers and desktops and endpoints, but you've got vulnerabilities coming in from applications and cloud services and SaaS apps and all of these other places. Where do you see the overall vulnerability management market going, and where is Rapid7 heading or dealing with the fact that we now have vulnerabilities coming from so many different places?
That's exactly why we acquired Noetic
Yep.
because it pulls in the applications, the cloud, it maps it to specific, assets to users because again, like that's why I said like VM is becoming ASM because it's not just servers and workstations anymore. To your point, it's containers, it's serverless, it's cloud, it's you name it. If it's got a vulnerability on it and it's in our network or it's interacting with our net, we need to know about it. And it's kind of twofold. It's not just surfacing the issues, it's how can we address these issues tactically and strategically is going to be the name of the game because it's great if you can plug a hole or virtually patch something like some other vendors are trying to offer. But until you actually address the root cause, it's just a band-aid on top of the wound. It's not going to solve the problem. So like, great, we can patch these vulnerabilities, but can we help you also identify the ingress points to the thing so you can cut those down or the permissions or the system, the CIS checks or AWS's best practices or whatever that can actually mitigate some of the boom should this bad thing happen because we all know like it's great. Like I want they'll patch all the things, right? But change control boards are a thing. Like and they can sometimes be very onerous. So that emergency patch that you want to push through in 24 hours might have to go through a change control request, which might take longer than 24 hours. So what can I turn on the back end that can mitigate the boom if this thing gets exploited from the time that we say we want to patch it till when we actually patch it. So it's a combination of all of that that I think is really going to make a difference. And that's where you're seeing like a lot of the market going is really consolidating all of that into one place because unless you have the view and the attack paths to add the context that you need, you're going to be chasing like you can't chase the flood of vulns that exist. It's impossible to keep up with the number of critical exploitable vulnerabilities that are in all of our environments. And a lot of people don't have BCP DR plans where it's like, here's our critical assets. These are where we need to start first. And even within those BCPDR plans, which one's public facing? What's the second level systems that interact with those? Like, there's a lot that goes into it that we just don't necessarily have the answers for in one place. Now we're solving that problem and giving you, here's your one place, here's your view. We're going to show you what those things are that you need to address. And again, now we're going to help you do it as well with workflows. So it's solving that. That's just been my beef with the industry, as a practitioner, is like, awesome, more problems. Good deal. Like, I don't have enough of these to worry about at the end of my day. But which one of these new problems do they supersede my old problems? Do they just get in line at the very end? Like, how do I make sense of the flood of things that I have to fix at the end of the day?
And what is actually critical for my business versus what isn't, right? I think that is always a challenge for people to understand, like, oh, this looks like a high alert. Okay, but not for me because of this. Or, hey, this one isn't. Well, but it is for me because of this, and this. Depends completely on your environment.
And there's no way, and that's why we've kind of introduced, like the custom risk scoring with, surface and exposure command, because there's no way any vendor is going to be able to take into account every single customer's unique, every environment is a snowflake. Like, I don't believe in too many snowflakes, but customers' environments are snowflakes. They might be 99% similar, but there's always going to be that one little crystal that's just out of whack that makes you a unique entity. And I can't give you just a blanket statement of, here's your vulnerabilities, here's the ones you should fix. Everybody's different. Every server, I could take two servers with the exact same software, exact same vulnerabilities, but the data is a little different. This one's going to have a monetary value of 100,000. This one's going to have a monetary value of $1 million. But that monetary value is not something that can be gleaned by software. It's something that only the organization knows. And unless they could put that in there and adjust the risk scoring, it's going to be some, here's our new risk model. Like, well, that's great. It's not my risk model. Like, it's got to be mine. Give me advice. Give me all the data to make the appropriate decisions, but don't tell me what my risk model is going to be. Like, that's just hubris.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Anthony, I learned something today. And what I learned was squeaky, squeak, squeaker, squeaking. And that you should definitely, under no circumstances, ever throw off the Emperor's Groove. Gardner, I really appreciate you joining us today.
Appreciate it, man. You didn't give me spinach puffies.
A very entertaining and fun episode of the podcast. And for folks that are out there, like, subscribe, do all the fun YouTube stuff. And if you want to learn more about Rapid7, we've got some details in the comments here. And Gardner, thanks again. And we'll see everyone for episode 47.